They didn't just fire me, they tried to erase me. But they forgot one thing: I remember everything. And now, so will everyone else. I still remember the first day I walked into that office, bright-eyed, nervous, and more excited than I'd ever been. It wasn't just a job to me. It felt like stepping into a dream I'd worked years to reach. The clean glass walls, the soft hum of focused conversations, the smell of fresh coffee from the break room, it all felt like possibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, valued. I was part of something bigger than myself. I wasn't just another cog in the machine. My ideas were heard, my work made a difference, and my manager, David, even told me once, "You've got the spark, man. People like you don't stay unnoticed for long." That sentence stayed with me. It fueled my drive. Over time, my coworkers became more than just faces at a desk. We grabbed lunch together, laughed over office mishaps, and pulled late nights that somehow didn't feel exhausting because we believed in what we were building. It wasn't perfect, sure, but it felt close enough. Within 2 years, I climbed fast. I was handling bigger projects, getting invites to high-level meetings, and was even being talked about for a leadership role. My parents were proud, my friends were impressed, and for once I felt proud of myself. I wasn't rich, but I had stability, I had purpose, I had a future. But looking back now, I realize how carefully everything was wrapped in illusion. Like standing on a glass floor convinced it's concrete until it cracks beneath you. It started subtly. A few awkward silences in meetings, people avoiding eye contact, tasks getting reassigned without explanation. At first, I thought I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just busy, maybe I was tired, but deep down something started to feel off. I tried brushing it off. I told myself not to be paranoid. But that nagging feeling never left. And soon I'd find out why. At first, it was just little things. A project I was supposed to lead got quietly handed to someone else, no explanation, no discussion. I only found out because I wasn't included in the kickoff meeting. When I asked my manager about it, he just said, "Oh, thought you were too tied up with other stuff." It didn't sit right. I wasn't that busy, and he knew it. Then came the performance review. I'd been looking forward to it. I had hit every deadline, exceeded targets, and even stepped in to clean up a mess left by another team. But when I walked into that room, David wasn't smiling like he used to. His words were careful, vague. "We've noticed some inconsistencies, areas for improvement. Nothing major, just things to keep in mind." Inconsistencies? What inconsistencies? When I asked for specifics, he hesitated. "It's more about perception," he said. That word stuck with me, perception. It felt like a warning I couldn't see the shape of yet. The people I used to laugh with during lunch stopped inviting me out. Conversations paused when I walked into rooms. Emails I sent started getting delayed replies, or worse, no replies at all. I caught whispers, glances. I felt like I was becoming invisible, slowly being erased. Still, I told myself to push through. Maybe it was office politics. Maybe someone was just spreading rumors. Maybe I'd fix it if I worked harder, stayed quieter, proved myself again. I didn't want to believe something darker was going on. I didn't want to believe that a place I once called home could turn cold. One night I stayed late to finish a report. The office was empty, lights dimmed. I walked past the conference room and heard my name. I stopped, pressed my ear to the door. "Yeah, we'll have to let him go soon. It's cleaner if it looks like a performance issue." My stomach dropped. My heart pounded in my ears. I stepped back before anyone noticed. My hands were shaking. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a setup. And I was already in the trap. The next morning, I walked into the office like a ghost. Every face looked the same, but I saw them differently now. Every smile felt forced. Every hello felt like a lie. That sentence I'd overheard echoed in my head. "It's cleaner if it looks like a performance issue." I couldn't focus. I made it through the day on autopilot, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was unraveling. Why me? What had I done? I started replaying every moment over the past few months, looking for clues I might have missed. I couldn't find anything that made sense. I'd worked hard, stayed loyal, delivered results. That used to be enough. Apparently, it wasn't anymore. Then came the email. Subject line: "Urgent, client escalation, please review." It was from David. Attached was a report I'd supposedly written, except I hadn't. It was riddled with errors, misquoted data, and a decision trail that pointed straight to me. I opened it 3 times, hoping I was misunderstanding something. But the message was clear. They were setting me up. Within hours, I was called into a meeting with HR. They said a client had complained about my negligence, that my recent work had been problematic and cost the company trust. They asked me to explain my decision-making, to account for actions I hadn't taken, to defend mistakes I didn't make. I tried to speak. My voice shook as I explained that I hadn't written the report, that someone else must have manipulated it or switched files. But I saw it in their eyes. They weren't listening. They weren't looking for truth. They were checking off a box. That was the moment I realized it was over. Not officially, not yet, but the walls were closing in fast. Someone powerful wanted me gone, and they were laying the bricks carefully, quietly, legally. When I left the meeting, I sat in my car for almost an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dashboard, numb. I was being erased one lie at a time. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Or so I thought. It happened on a Wednesday. Just another midweek morning, or at least that's how it started. I came in early, trying to pretend things were okay, trying to prove I was still valuable. I smiled at the receptionist, logged into my computer, and opened a report I didn't even care about anymore. At 9:12 a.m., I got the calendar invite. Meeting HR immediate, location room C. No subject, no warning, just a hollow feeling in my chest as I clicked accept. I knew what was coming, but nothing prepared me for how it would feel. David was already in the room when I arrived. His tie was loose, eyes tired, like he didn't want to be there either. HR sat across from him, folder in hand. There was no small talk, no explanations. Just the words, "We're terminating your employment effective immediately." I think my brain shut down for a second. I just stared at them. I couldn't even feel anger yet, only disbelief. They handed me a paper, legal language, phrases like violation of expectations and failure to meet performance standards. Lies dressed up in corporate polish. "I didn't do what you're accusing me of," I said quietly. "You know that." David didn't look at me. HR just said, "You can challenge the findings through formal channels if you wish, but the decision has been finalized." They gave me 10 minutes to clear my desk. No goodbyes, no explanation to my team. Security stood in the corner as I packed up my things like I was dangerous, like I was a threat. Walking out of that building was like stepping into a vacuum. One minute I had a career, a purpose, an identity. The next I was just gone. Outside, the sun was shining. Birds were chirping. The world kept spinning like nothing had happened. I sat on the curb with my box of stuff in my lap. A coffee mug, a few notebooks, a framed photo from last year's office retreat. That photo hurt the most. I used to belong there. I used to matter. Now I didn't even exist. The days that followed were a blur. I stopped setting alarms. I didn't leave the apartment. My phone buzzed a few times, a couple of coworkers texting, pretending to check in but really just fishing for gossip. I didn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to explain it anyway. How do you put into words the feeling of having your whole world yanked out from under you? I wasn't just angry. I was humiliated. I kept thinking about how they looked at me in that room, cold, rehearsed, like I was just a task they needed to check off. After everything I gave to that place. After all the hours, the loyalty, the sacrifices. I felt like a fool. I'd bought into the dream that if you worked hard and stayed honest, you'd get rewarded. But they took all of that and crushed it in a matter of minutes. No fight, no dignity, just silence. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake replaying every conversation, every meeting, every moment where I might have missed the signs. I started digging through old emails, looking for proof of what I didn't even know yet. Maybe to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I had done good work, that I had mattered. And then I found it, an old project file from months ago. One that had gone surprisingly well, considering how messy it was at the start. I remembered how I had stayed 3 nights in a row to clean it up, how I pulled it across the finish line. But when I opened the final credit summary, my name wasn't listed anywhere. That was the first time I truly felt it in my gut. This wasn't just an accident. This had been building, quietly, strategically. Someone had been cutting me out long before I even noticed. I slammed the laptop shut and sat there, shaking. I had no job, no income, no direction. But I had one thing, memory. I remembered everything, every detail, every lie, every meeting, every line they crossed. And for the first time since it all happened, I felt something stir in me. Maybe they thought I'd disappear. But maybe Maybe I could make sure they never forgot what they did. I didn't make the decision all at once. It wasn't like I jumped out of bed one morning and said, I'm going to write a book. It was slower than that, quieter, like a whisper that started somewhere deep in my chest and grew louder every day I sat in silence. One night I opened a blank document. No title, no structure, just a blinking cursor and a head full of chaos. I typed one sentence. They didn't fire me for failing. They fired me because I knew too much. Then I stared at the screen for almost an hour. I didn't even know who I was writing to. No one would believe me without proof. And even if they did, what was the point? I didn't have a job, a platform, or a plan, just memories and a pile of rage. But that sentence didn't leave me. So the next day I added another and another. I started from the beginning, the day I got hired, the first project I led, the first time David praised my work. I wrote it all out, not to impress anyone, not to convince anyone, but to remember. I needed to see it laid out in front of me. I needed to understand how something so good turned so ugly. The writing helped me breathe, helped me think straight. The more I wrote, the more I realized how much I hadn't said at the time, how much I swallowed, ignored, or explained away. Things that now screamed at me in hindsight. Patterns emerged, people, politics, power moves I hadn't noticed while I was busy trying to fit in, and with every chapter the truth became sharper. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me silent. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not just for me, but for anyone who'd ever been discarded and told to move on. Anyone who gave everything to something, only to be tossed aside. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth out in the open. So I kept writing. And I didn't stop. The truth is, writing the book didn't heal me. It hurt me. Every sentence felt like ripping open a scar. Some days I couldn't make it past a single paragraph without shutting the laptop and walking away, heart pounding, hands trembling. I'd find myself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., replaying arguments, fake smiles, and betrayals I thought I'd buried. But I kept going. Not because I was strong, but because I had nothing else. Writing became the only thing that felt real anymore. It was the one place where I still had a voice. I wrote about the late nights no one saw, the weekends I gave up, the quiet way my ideas were taken and passed off as someone else's. I wrote about the meeting where I realized I was being slowly erased, the fake concern in David's voice, the way HR acted like I was a stranger the moment they no longer needed me. But the hardest parts weren't about them, they were about me. I had to admit things I didn't want to see, like how long I ignored the warning signs, how much I wanted to belong, how I laughed at jokes that made me uncomfortable, how I stayed silent when I should have spoken up, just to keep the peace. There were moments where I hated myself more than I hated them. But somewhere in the middle of all that mess, something shifted. I stopped writing just about the company. I started writing about the system, how it rewards the loudest voices, not the hardest workers. How it chews up people like me, loyal, quiet, eager, and spits us out when we stop being convenient. I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a pattern, a cycle. And maybe, just maybe, someone else needed to read this. Someone on the edge, someone who thought they were alone. So I kept pushing through the pain. I kept writing, even when it hurt. Because silence was how they won. And I was done staying quiet. Finishing the book felt less like a victory, and more like standing at the edge of a cliff. For weeks, I just stared at the final page, read it, reread it, closed the file, opened it again. My cursor hovered over the words publish on the self-publishing site more times than I could count. Part of me was terrified. What if no one believed me? What if they did and still didn't care? What if the people I wrote about found it and came after me legally? I'd changed names, avoided confidential details, but still, I knew the lines I was towing. I didn't have a legal team or a PR agent, just a Word document and a fire in my chest. But I also knew something else. Silence wasn't protecting me anymore, it was protecting them. So one night, without fanfare, without telling anyone, I uploaded the manuscript, titled it, The Invisible Employee, How Loyalty Gets You Fired. Set the price to 0, hit publish. Then I shut my laptop and walked outside. The sky was clear, cold wind cut across my face. I stood there on the sidewalk, breathing deep. For the first time in months, I felt light, not because things were fixed, but because the truth was finally out. At first, nothing happened. A few downloads, a couple of quiet messages from strangers, people saying the story hit too close to home, that they'd been through the same, that they felt seen. Then someone posted it on a corporate worker forum. Then it spread. I started getting messages from people across the country. Anonymous profiles, real names, some crying, some furious, some grateful. One woman told me she read the entire thing in one sitting on her lunch break, then cried in her car. The book was raw, imperfect, but it was real. And for the first time since I lost everything, I didn't feel alone. I hadn't just written a story. I had started a conversation. It didn't take long before the silence cracked. 3 weeks after the book started gaining attention, I got an email. Subject line, urgent legal inquiry. It was from the company's legal department. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen, heart pounding. It felt like being back in that HR office again, small, powerless, trapped. My hands were shaking. All the fear I thought I'd worked through came flooding back in a single wave. When I finally opened the email, it was what I expected, carefully worded, firm but polite. They claimed my book contained potentially defamatory claims, that I had breached confidentiality, and that they were reviewing legal options. I knew it was a scare tactic. I'd been careful, no real names, no internal files, just my story, my experience. But it still rattled me. I spent the next few days looking over every chapter again, double-checking what I'd written. I read through forums and blogs about whistleblowers and free speech. I even spoke with a lawyer friend who told me, they're hoping fear will do what silence couldn't. He was right, and this time I refused to let fear win. I responded to their email calmly, confidently. I reminded them that the book was a personal account, anonymized and protected under free expression. I let them know I wasn't backing down. Then something unexpected happened. Someone from inside the company messaged me. A mid-level manager I barely knew. He said, "You were right, a lot of us knew what was going on. We just didn't say anything." That message meant more than any review or viral post. I realized something then. They weren't afraid because I lied. They were afraid because I told the truth. I knew I might lose more for speaking out. But at that point, I also knew I'd already lost too much by staying quiet. Let them threaten, let them squirm. I wasn't going back into the shadows. I had found my voice, and I intended to keep using it. It's strange how healing doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, quietly, like sunlight after a long storm. Months have passed since I published the book. The legal threats faded. They never followed through. I think they realized the more they pushed, the louder my story became. I wasn't trying to burn anyone down. I was just telling the truth, and that somehow was more powerful than I expected. The book spread further than I imagined. Someone turned it into a podcast episode. A small publisher reached out, interested in helping me develop it into a longer memoir. But even beyond all that, the biggest surprise was the community that grew around it. Emails, comments, people I'd never met from all walks of life saying, "This happened to me too." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something to give again. Not just words, not just warnings, but hope. I started writing more, not just about my experience, but about toxic work culture, quiet exploitation, burnout, and dignity. I shared tools. I offered advice. I told people it was okay to walk away when something stops valuing them. And slowly, something shifted in me too. I stopped waking up angry. I stopped needing them to acknowledge what they did. Because I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need a title to prove I had worth. I had my voice and I had my truth. That was more than they ever gave me. I still pass the old office building sometimes. I don't go out of my way, but when I do, I don't feel bitterness anymore. Just a quiet distance. Like seeing an old scar, no longer tender but never forgotten. They took my job. They tried to take my dignity. But in the end, they gave me something else. They gave me a story. And I turned that story into freedom.